Next, we have James Malls from Ideal, and James and team have been working with us to design, a new new philosophy, all the way from the physical layer of the cards to the usability layer to the digital, and very soon about the integration. So James, it's been a pleasure working with you, and looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me. Hopefully you can see my screen here. One moment. Okay. So when we started on this project, there had clearly been a lot of rigor put into the technical side of this, and there continues to be. And that freed us at IDEO up to start thinking about the human experience here and some of the touch points along the vaccination journey, and the way that we can have some positive impact on those, keep the the human interest at the forefront of our minds as we're designing, and then leverage the collective input of all of the people we have to ensure that we're meeting the highest standards of accessibility and usability, and really working in a way that is iterative and fast, so that we're not being too precious about any one thing, but rather using all of the artifacts that we're surfacing to support the journey as a means of provoking conversation and asking questions and hopefully digging a little bit deeper. So while in some ways this maybe feels a little rudimentary, we always are trying to remind ourselves who we're building for. And we are anchoring around the user or the vaccine recipient experience, but in order to create the best experience for that person or those people, we also have to design all of the interactions between all of the people that they come into contact with in the process of completing a vaccination journey. So in doing that, in surfacing more artifacts that talk about each one of these moments, we begin to start kind of putting pieces together that can inform our path forward to creating something that works for a wide swath of people of different levels of literacy, different cultural backgrounds, whatever situations we can surface and imagine, we're trying to make sure that we're cognizant of those and designing for them. So one of the first places to start is thinking about what already exists. And there are already vaccination report cards related to COVID, related to other kinds of vaccines. And we've got some clearly new challenges here. But if we can start to work with something that people have a familiar framework with, maybe we can make something that doesn't feel so jarring or so new. And it allows us to begin to augment and build on top of that thing in a way that is mindful and respectful of the audiences that we're delivering to. So our early explanation or explorations already started to have some provocative results. We heard a lot about the way that we're using these different machine readable codes, QR codes, to reveal different levels of information at different moments that is really guided by the user, which is great. But how can we make those machine readable codes a little bit more bilingual? Something that is sensible to the human as well, which both protects the vaccine recipient, but also the people who are going to be distributing these codes to people, making sure they're receiving the right ones and they're using the right ones at the right moments, if that makes sense. And then, even from a very practical point of view, we have to think about the materiality of these things, the layout. How durable are these going to be if you're going to be carrying it around long term? How might they be replaceable by people if they become damaged or lost? How can you protect privacy in something that is very physical and tangible? So in some of the explorations that we've done, simple things like changing the way the folding scheme works with these cards can allow a person to obscure certain information that they may not want to show. So if I'm going to a venue and I only want to show my status badge, how can I fold and reconfigure this piece to allow that to be visible, but not something else? If I did damage or lose my piece and I want the opportunity to be able to reprint one at home, how can we format this to fit a simple 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that can be folded in half? And now I have something that's two-sided and very closely mimics the one that you may have received in a direct mail. Talking again about the QR codes, how might we be able to embed some visuals in there, icons, symbols, and things that allow me as a person to be able to quickly glance at one of these and see, this one is my pass key, this is my status key, and so on. This also kind of feeds into the experience, again, with a health administrator. If they're doing tons of these a day, they're vaccinating lots of people, they're producing lots of these codes at their vaccination site. How can we put them in the best position to ensure that they're putting the right codes in the right places if we're using a sticker-based system, for example? So we're looking at those elements of the usability and the experiences between the vaccine recipient and all of the other players throughout this design process. And then we start getting into the digital as well. And on the left side here, we're really kind of looking at the health administrator experience. And one of the things that we wanted to do was, again, thinking about what exists and what we know, how can we create an experience that feels familiar and feels simple and guided, but reinforces safety and confidence both in the administrator and the user, the vaccine recipient. So we were really trying to look at the journey of coming in with an eligibility coupon and following that all the way through to getting a first dose and receiving some badges. And, you know, while it is fairly familiar, we go through sequential experiences on our devices all the time. Surfacing these and building it and creating quick prototypes allowed us to just find gaps already and start thinking at even that screen that was just up there. If you can do a simple thing like change the orientation of a badge or print one that is contained in a circular sticker instead of a square sticker, how might that allow these different pieces to become immediately recognizable by both the administrator and the recipient in that moment that is, you know, maybe a little bit stressful or a little scary or a little new. You know, there are opportunities here to for these things to become a little bit more complex than they might not ordinarily be were we not in the scenario that we are in the world today. So just trying to keep all of these external factors in mind as we're designing and trying to work that mindfulness into the design solutions that we're creating. So again, with the idea of zooming in and zooming out, we at every moment, we're designing these things and we want them to feel welcoming and to feel accessible and not overwhelming. And the way to get to that oftentimes is in the visuals, in the color and, you know, placement, all of these things that are of course important to design and usability, but, you know, we always want to make sure that we're pulling back when we're a little bit too deep in that space and to reorient ourselves around the journey and to start thinking about some of these other things that may happen. We were recently talking about the fact that a place like Gillette Stadium might be a vaccination site. And we had this whole journey designed around starting your day as a health administrator and scanning your vaccine batch. And now you're set up for the day. You can vaccinate everyone. We know everyone is receiving the dose from this batch. But if we're doing something in massive volume or on a larger scale, you know, maybe that throws a little curveball into our journey. And we need to think about what it looks like to change your batch midstream, as an example. You know, talk again about the different ways that we can tweak the QR codes to make them continue to be machine legible, which is obviously of utmost importance. But what can we do to aid in the human legibility of these things? Always something that we're super concerned about. The materiality of these things in a direct mail. How can we keep that consistent with what someone might produce at home if they need to make a replacement? How can we maybe make these interact with things that we're familiar with, like Google Wallet or Apple Wallet, in the same way that we're used to doing this with boarding passes, concert tickets? How might we be able to facilitate that kind of interaction while maintaining all of the security that we're concerned about? So all along the way, we're asking ourselves lots of questions, and at each moment when we're asking these questions, we're trying to create a design artifact that allows us to put that in front of people and just get reactions, and to help it feel real enough that people can give us well thought out responses, but to not be precious in any way, and know that all of these things are sacrificial and are here right now as prototypes purely for the purposes of gaining more just collective brain power into our design decisions. So, from here, we're leaving ourselves lots of blank spaces. We're in the nitty gritty of thinking about how big do these QR codes need to be versus the icon that lives inside? What kind of elements can we put around these things to really differentiate them from one another? Where do they need to live on the card to ensure that you don't accidentally scan the wrong one if you're doing this really quickly, or you're a bouncer at a venue or something like that, to ensure that they can have a nice, smooth, consistent experience in using these things? And those same mentalities will go into the digital parts of this as well. Just leaving ourselves lots of spaces to continue to explore and collect input, so that we can build something that fulfills all of the needs of the people that we're serving, to ensure that this thing is as effective as it can possibly be. And I'm really honored to be able to have a part in this work, and thank you all for looking at what we've been building.
Thank you, James.